If you're here today, then I can assume one or two things about you. The first is that you understand the importance of invested mentors and positive influence in the lives of kids and students. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. The second is that you are either the product of someone else's time and investment in your life, or you recognize, in hindsight, that you needed it and were never given it. In both cases, whether you had it or you didn't, you were impacted and affected. We all come with our unique experiences, and those experiences qualify us in different ways to make an impact in the lives of kids and students. But if we're going to get anywhere, we have to be willing to recognize that a very big challenge is set before us. The fact of the matter is that the percentage of kids who grew up in church only to walk away from their faith when they go to college is staggering. Fuller Theological Institute says 50%. Lifeway Christian Resources says 60%. Barna Group says 70%. Even if we go with the lowest reported statistic, we're looking at half of our kids choosing to walk away from their faith in spite of, and maybe even because of, experiences they had while in the church. So, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that we can't keep doing business as usual if we want to change the current trends. We need to be willing to examine what we're doing and ask hard questions in order to arrive at real conclusions. This is the only way that we'll grow. We need to be willing to accept that what we're doing may not be enough. And that's true no matter how good we are at holding it all together. We need to stop playing the blame game. Parents and teachers are easy targets, but they're not the only ones responsible for raising and teaching our kids. And we need to be willing to create a different kind of experience so that students can grow a mobilized and enduring kind of faith. Different can be scary, but it can also be good. That brings us back to the point I made at the very beginning. Some of you were changed because someone looked at you and thought that you were worth his or her time and attention. And some of you know how much of a toll it took on you that there wasn't someone there to fill that place in your life. At the end of the day, it's not about the program. It's not about the numbers. It's about connection. The front lines are where life happens. Our kids and students live on the front lines. And if we want to make a difference in the lives of the next generation, the front lines are where we're called to go. So surely such a big challenge as the one we're facing requires an equally big solution in order to reverse it, right? Wrong. The solution is actually a small one. If every teenager had a place to belong and someone to believe in them, it could radically affect their faith and their future. We can't do that for every teenager, but we can do that for a few. And this isn't about a better presentation or clearer communication. I mean, both of those things are good, but they're not as effective as they can be without relationship. There has to be a relationship between a kid and a leader. And that relationship holds the key to the future and faith of that kid. Not because we know the right answers, but because we understand that God wired us for community. Remember those statistics about kids in college? If we're going to change those numbers, we need to understand that it's not about doing ministry to the masses. It's about doing ministry to a handful of people. Now, this concept was illustrated by Jesus and his disciples, and we couldn't spell it out any more clearly than he did. What you do for a few will always have more potential than what you do for many. What is a small group leader? A small group leader is someone who invests strategically in the lives of a few over time so you can help them build an authentic faith. The role is not that of a coach, teacher, or counselor. It's bits and pieces of all those things, and at the same time, not any of them. The art of being a small group leader is learning how to navigate all those different roles and combine them into something unique. And it may take a little work, but the work is worth it because the kids and students are worth it. We want a generation to grow up holding on to a faith that is rooted in Scripture, that is mobilized, that is enduring, that has been tested and tried and has come out on the other side. We want kids to learn how to place their trust in God, not only in a moment at Vacation Bible School or on the last night of camp. We want that trust to be present every day. We want them to have big faith, authentic faith. And the only way you can cultivate authentic faith is through leading small with the help of 5 core principles that will help as guideposts along the way.
We've established that Jesus demonstrated for us what it looks like to lead small. As much as he made an impact on the crowds he preached to and the people he healed along the way, he saved the best parts of himself for his disciples. They were taught the most important lessons, were tested by him in the most important ways, and were loved by him the most clearly. He shared their meals. He laughed at their jokes. He acknowledged their pain. He encouraged them to live out the things he tried to teach them, and he held his hand out to them whenever one of them stumbled. He did all of this because there were only 12 of them. That kind of care and attention can't be adequately given in a room full of people. Leading small can only be done right with a few, and it starts with 5 principles. The first principle of leading small is be present. There's nothing that can substitute for physical presence. Production and environments are important, but they don't take the place of having a consistent adult in the life of a kid or student. And if you have to economize and budget, don't let relationships be the thing you skimp out on. Give your attention and energy towards giving those relationships priority and life. At the end of the day, something else will outshine you as far as production and environments go. Disney and social media are loud contenders for kids and students' attention. But Disney, social media, and even excellence in our own programs and communicators will never be able to give kids and students the kind of face-to-face time and attention that authentic community can offer. Small group leaders, you have something that those things will never be able to offer. The best productions can't compete with what you can put in the life of a kid relationally. So play up your strengths. In a church of 50 or in a church of 5,000, your strength is one-on-one relationships. Your strength is looking at a kid or teenager and saying, "You're my priority." And I'm going to show that to you by being here every week because you're worth it. In 1 Thessalonians, Paul said it this way, "So we cared for you because we loved you so much. We were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well." That's the job of a small group leader. You care, you love, you delight. That's the place where faith and futures are changed. There are way too many kids and teenagers who don't believe in God. Why? Because there are way too many kids and teenagers who don't have consistent adults in their lives who love them like God loves them. When you're present for your few, you give them the opportunity to understand what it means to be forgiven by someone. And when you're present for your few, you connect them to something that is bigger than themselves, a community of faith. So what does that mean to be present for your few? Where do we start? First, show up predictably. Commit to being in their lives for a season of time, whatever amount of time that is, and actually be there. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where trust is built. This is where you prove to your few that you're there for the long haul. Next, show up mentally. Your time with your few is limited. An hour or 2 a week isn't very long at all. So when you're with them, be with them. Tune out everything else that's going on in your life, prepare ahead of time, and give them your best. Your undivided attention is a gift for your few. Lastly, show up randomly. Use tools like social media or texting to wish them luck on their test. Be a smiling face in the crowd at a game or recital. Support them during milestones like graduations or birthday parties. Reinforce that you believe in them and care for them. You cannot lead a small group without trust. You cannot build a community without trust. Toddlers need someone who doesn't look like a stranger. Elementary schoolers need someone who remembers the name of their goldfish. Middle schoolers need someone who is up to date on their weekly, sometimes daily, dramas. High schoolers need someone who knows their struggle and is committed to sticking by them. When you show up on a regular basis, predictably, mentally, and randomly, you are well on your way to connecting your kids and students to a community of believers who encourage authentic faith. Kids and teenagers need community just as much as adults do. It isn't a need that we ever grow out of. God created us for community. Jesus illustrated community. The early church practiced community. And when you're present for your few, you're engaging in this very human need. You're providing your few with community. You're giving them the opportunity to practice loving others. And you're teaching kids and students they're worth being loved by others.
As important as showing up and being present for your group is, your job as a small group leader doesn't stop there. In ancient times, officials would carve roses into the ceilings of political conference areas and would designate the conversations in those rooms as sub rosa, which meant under the rose. It was a way of saying that what happens in this room stays in this room. The idea was meant to encourage open conversation because the space could be seen as a safe one. And after time passed, the roses came to symbolize this safe space so effectively that they were even carved into the interior of confessional booths where people came to talk to priests. To be sub rosa meant that you could be open and honest. It meant that you could trust the people you were talking to. And this needs to be true of your small group too. Part of your job as a small group leader is to give kids and teenagers a safe place to speak freely, process their doubts, wrestle with questions, and talk about their issues and ideas. Creating a safe place isn't something that happens overnight. It takes time for kids and teenagers to learn how to trust you and the other group members. Trust is an investment. It's something that we have to mutually earn. And while we can't promise that it'll happen immediately, we can promise that these 3 strategies will help to guide you towards it. First, lead the group. Now that may sound like a given, seeing as you're the small group leader, but it's worth explaining. You are responsible for the dynamic and discussions in the group. You set the tone, you navigate the current, and that's especially true when it comes to tension. Tension is inevitable, and while you may feel the temptation to lean away from it, the truth is that tension isn't a bad thing. It's natural, and it's meant to be engaged with. So leverage the tension, lean into it, and teach your few to learn from it. Tension is a result of our differences, and our differences are just opportunities to demonstrate unconditional love. If your group is a safe place for differences and tensions to be expressed and navigated, then your few will learn how to show up for other people. They'll learn how powerful it is to accept others and to be accepted by them. So lean into those tensions. In other words, lead the group. Second, respect the process. Like we said before, establishing that your group is a safe place isn't something that happens overnight. You're contending with different personalities, different temperaments, different backgrounds, and different beliefs that fall on a wide spectrum. And if you got into this thing because you wanted to change people, then you're going to end up exhausted and even discouraged. The truth is that it isn't up to us to change people. We aren't God, we aren't the Holy Spirit. God is the one who changes us. The Holy Spirit is the one who refines us. We can't change everyone. We can't even change anyone, but we can love a few. The Bible doesn't say to change your neighbor as yourself. It says to love your neighbor. And love is a process. Change is a process. God's work in your few is a process. So respect the process. And third, guard the heart. Now, it may feel like I'm about to contradict the first point, but the unfortunate truth is that the work of creating a safe place for your group may require you to break their trust. While we can all hope for the best where our few are concerned, the truth is that the kids and teenagers in our groups are hurting. They're going through things that we may not be fully equipped to understand or even deal with. And when kids are experiencing one of the 3 hurts, being hurt, hurting others, or hurting themselves, it's essential to guard their heart at the expense of breaking their confidence. Our church has policies in place to help direct us when these kinds of things happen, and sometimes trust has to be broken in order to protect our kids. It isn't an easy decision to make, but it's a necessary one. Leading your group takes work. Respecting the process takes time. Guarding the heart takes effort. But when you create a safe place inside of your group, you give your few opportunities to grow and learn. They deserve the chance to sit in a space where they're accepted, where their ideas are safe, and where honesty is valued. So model those things for your few. Celebrate everyone equally. Shut down gossip. If individual issues arise, address them privately, and then give your few the chance to do those things themselves. The truth is that if your few can't be their Monday through Saturday selves when they're with you in group, they'll have a hard time applying their faith in everyday situations. If they can't share their doubts in community, they'll dwell on them privately. If they can't ask you their questions, they're going to ask someone else. And if they don't admit their struggles to someone, they'll never experience the power of bringing things to light in a way that facilitates freedom and forgiveness. So create a safe place for your few and give them the gift of a space where they can be themselves and expect acceptance, honesty, protection, and love.
When it comes to your place in a kid or student's life, being present for them and creating a safe place will go a long way to earning influence. But it won't ever mean that you are the primary influence. No matter how much time a kid spends with you in small group, it can't be matched by how much time they spend at home with their families. Sometimes, if you're really honest, you might catch yourself thinking you could be a better parent to one of your few than the parent they currently have. Maybe you're right. Or maybe you don't know the whole story. Regardless of their issues, baggage, and brokenness, every parent wants to be a better parent. This is why it's so necessary to talk about parents and the importance of partnering with them. Families come in all shapes and sizes. They're built in so many different ways, but the numbers are consistent. In a given year, you as a small group leader will only have an average of about 40 hours with your group. That number could double if you also work summer camp or vacation Bible school with your few. In comparison, families have about 3,000 hours. As you can see, the numbers don't match. They don't compare, not by a long shot. You can't ignore the family, and you can't ignore the influence the family has, whether good or bad. And the truth is that if you want to maximize your influence with the kids and students in your group, you need to partner with the family. You need to partner with the parents. Small group leaders, you are in the prime position to be able to do this. So I invite you to consider the kids and students in your group or who will be in your group and ask yourself this question: how can I partner with their families and with their parents? One of the greatest ways isn't by adding programs, but having the small group leader be the connector between the few and the family. Small group leaders could ask the questions, how can I partner with the family? How can I partner with the parent? We can't give you the perfect answer to those questions because every parent and every family is different. But we can give you 3 strategies to help direct you as you do your best to navigate this. First, cue the parent. It's easy to make assumptions and judgments about the parents and families of our few. But if we start with assuming that they want the best for their kids and teenagers, it's a safe place to start. And if we assume that they care about their kids and want to know what's going on in their lives, then let's begin by introducing ourselves. Cue them about what you're talking about in group. Leverage social media and let parents know when Vacation Bible School or summer camps are on the way. Give them a heads up when the group will be talking about interesting or sensitive subjects. Cue the parents so that they aren't the last to know important things. Second, honor the parent. Whether the parents of your few attend your church, or any church for that matter, or not, they may not have the complete picture of what role you intend to play in their kids' lives. You aren't a substitute parent. You aren't an alternative voice for kids and teenagers to listen to so that they don't have to listen to their parents. You aren't the enemy. Don't make the mistake of leveraging yourself as the hero. If you want to maximize the influence you have with your few, you have to be on the parent side. So honor the parent. If you're not on the parent side, you're not on the kid side. Lastly, reinforce the family. It's easy to get caught up in your own small group. But when we remember the comparison between a small group's collective hours versus a family's collective hours, we remember that the family is the primary unit. So part of the role of a small group leader is to reinforce that primary unit. Don't plan your Christmas party on Christmas Eve when parents might want to spend that time with their kids. Don't insist on having important conversations with teenagers that parents prefer to have themselves. Don't forget to invite the parents who don't attend church to special occasions like baptisms. The truth is that the family and the influence it has on your kids' lives isn't always positive and healthy, but even a bad influence is still an influence. Sometimes parents make mistakes. Sometimes they don't show up. Sometimes they let their kids and teenagers down. But that doesn't mean that we stop cueing them or honoring them or reinforcing them. We do those things for the sake of the kids. And we do those things for the sake of the parents. By virtue of what you do, small group leaders, you are entering into relationship with parents too. When you commit your time and attention to kids and teenagers, their parents are a part of the package deal. Although parents potentially have 3,000 hours a year of possible time with their child, it's not always the same quality as the hours you have with your few. Your 40 hours are potentially filled with meaningful conversations, teachable moments, and bonding experiences that parents and guardians may not know how to have. So leverage your influence and partner with parents so that you all can collectively nurture an everyday kind of faith in your few.
One of the best parts about being a small group leader is that you're given the gift of a front row seat to the journey your few are on, in life and in faith. But there's a flip to that, and your few, in turn, have a front row seat to your life too. In fact, this is one of the reasons why small group leaders are so important to begin with. However much of your life that you share with your few will speak to them about your own story of restoration and redemption. But this also means you need to guard your personal and spiritual growth. When you lead kids and teenagers, there's a spotlight pointed at your life, and your few will always be watching. It's the nature of the job. This may be intimidating, but it isn't an intrusion. It's an invitation for you to examine your own life and spiritual growth. Now, we aren't going to quiz you on Bible trivia. We aren't going to stand over your shoulder and make our judgments about your spiritual habits. But we can give you 3 strategies intended to help you make it personal. First, live in community. Community isn't just a concept for kids and teenagers to dive into. You need it too. You need to be doing faith with people who are your peers. Your preschool and your sophomore groups aren't your community. They aren't the ones that you vent to. They aren't the ones that you solicit advice from. They aren't the ones that you necessarily even ask for prayer from, although you can when the time is right. They aren't the ones that you process doubts and hurts with. You need other adults in your life. You need a safe place where you can dump all your baggage. You need a place where you can be encouraged and challenged. And if you're going to look at your few and insist that community is important for spiritual growth, then you need to model that for yourself too. The small group you've formed with your few is for them. The community you live in with your peers is for you. Next, set priorities. Remember what I said about how your few will be watching? This is the perfect opportunity for them to peek into the life of an adult who models this and see what it looks like to set spiritual priorities. The truth is that they may not have other adults in their lives who are keeping their priorities straight. And your kids and teenagers may not have the benefit of being around any other adults who have their head on straight, who set time aside for important things, and who follow through on what they say. So leverage this spotlight. Spend time with your own kids. Be a good friend to others. Model a healthy and happy marriage. Make time for your own spiritual development and growth when you're not with your few. Let your small group see you demonstrating the discipline of setting priorities, whether spiritual, relational, or personal. The only way you'll effectively be able to discuss authentic faith with your few is if you are experiencing authentic faith in your own life. Lastly, be real. Now, this one may be a little tough if you're under the impression that the best small group leaders are the coolest or the funniest or the most talented. But you don't have to be cool or funny or insanely talented to lead kids and teenagers. The best volunteers aren't necessarily any of these things, but they're real and authentic. They're confident in who God made them to be, and they model for their few that kids and teenagers can be too. And that makes them the best small group leaders. So be real. Don't give in to the temptation to be something that you're not for the sake of winning over your few. Be authentically you. If you try to be someone in your circle that isn't consistent with who you are outside of it, you'll be found out. And if your few never catch on, then they'll be robbed of the chance of getting to know you and of learning how to appreciate and love a person who is different from them. This is why it's so important to make all of this personal in your life. How can you encourage your few to spend time reading their Bible if yours is currently used as a coaster on your coffee table? How can you emphasize the power of prayer if the only prayer in your life is the one your son recites before dinner? How can you point out the benefits of discussing their faith with others if your motto is never talk about religion, politics, or money? How can you push your few to live out their faith if you never serve, praise, or give? How can you teach your few to be confident in themselves if you only let them see a manufactured version of yourself? Live in community, set priorities, be real. When you make time and create margin for these things, you're helping to ensure that your few are being led by someone who's living this thing out for themselves. It's more important for them to see a real, live person who is still growing, learning, and trying to live out authentic faith than it is for them to have another friend. When you're at your best, you'll be able to give your best. And you should give your best because your few deserve the best.
From day one, your job as a small group leader is to move your few out beyond the circle of your group. It may sound a little contradictory when you pair this idea with the others we've talked about. After all, why should we spend our time creating a space where your few can feel safe and comfortable, a space they want to be, if we're going to try to push them out of it? And in a small way, you're correct. We want our groups to be safe places where kids and teenagers are excited to be. We want our groups to be a place of encouragement and growth where our few are challenged to do more than settle for what they think they're capable of. We want all of those things and so much more. But if we're not careful, the circle that our groups exist in can put boundaries on their experiences. Your goal is not to create a group where you invest your time and attention in a few kids and teenagers in order to convince them that the circle is where life stops. Why? Because when they move outside of the circle, they are free to engage with a story that is much bigger than just their story. And you can't do this fifth and final lead small principle effectively if you haven't put in the time and effort required to do the other four. So how do we move our few out of the circle we've spent time trying to build? We start the process from day one. First, move them to someone else. Research shows that a kid who has 3 or 4 committed adult influences in his or her life will have a greater chance of sustaining a mobilized faith than kids who don't. This is why it's so important to move your few out to other people where they can form connections. If your kids or teenagers start connecting with another adult besides you and it bothers you, get over it. It isn't about you. It's about discipling kids towards real connection with God and with people. And the more adults you help them connect to, the bigger their concept becomes of who God is, because they will see Him through other adults. Second, move them to be the church. Why are you a small group leader? Because you want to engage in the mission of God and to connect your life with others. Because you've been poured into, and you know that the purpose of being poured into is so that you can pour out into others. This idea is true for your few too. Inside of the group is where they are poured into. Outside of the group is where they pour themselves out. So move them to be the church. Move them towards ministry. Move them towards loving others and serving others, and practicing how to put others first. Move them towards experiences that will shape their perspectives on other people and will broaden their spiritual horizons. Move them out so that loving others becomes a part of their DNA, and so that their faith becomes a living thing. Third, move them to what's next. Transitions can be tough on people, no matter how old or young you are. And part of your job as a small group leader is to do what you can to prepare your few for their next steps. We may be tempted to see some of these transitions as small in comparison to others, but we have no way of knowing how anxious or worried or excited our few are about changes. Moving to the next grade or small group can be a source of fear. Graduating high school unlocks a world of opportunity and also a world of questions. Starting at a new school can be scary. Moving to a toddler bed can be scary. So be prepared to ask yourself, what can I do to help carry them through this? If we don't take the time to think through transitions that our few are going through or will go through, then we're setting them up to get disconnected when it is most critical. Don't assume that your kids aren't anxious about change. Don't assume that your high schoolers are adults and ready to tackle the world on their own. When you move your few out to what's next, you are setting them up for the long haul. From the time they show up in your world or ministry, kids and teenagers are packing their bags. It's a fact of life, and time passes in a blur. But you have the chance to influence what your few pack in their bags. So what are you going to do with that influence? What are you going to encourage them to pack? They need other adults who are willing to show up for them and speak into their world. They need opportunities to see their faith in action as they experience the difference between attending church and being the church. And they need as many guiding hands as they can hold on to while they move from one phase of their life into the next. In other words, they need people like you to move them out of the comfortable circles and teach them that they are capable of big things. You can't do this for every kid, but you can do this for a few.